Grant Robertson.
New Clause 10 that is in my name is an important addition to this bill because what we're trying to do by extending the debate around Clause 10 is to essentially make sure that students have all the information that they do need to be members within student associations. It's important, Mr. Chair, that in saying that we are putting forward a new Clause 10, that the bill essentially gives us the opportunity to ensure that student associations can survive, because that has been the concern raised on this side of the House and accepted by the National Party on the other side of the House, that the bill is not about destroying student associations. So if the bill's not about destroying student associations, then we need to provide a way in which student associations can continue to exist. So the new Clause 10 that I am proposing would insert a new section 229D into the Principal Act, and that is that the institution is to provide association funding. Every institution where a student association exists...
A point here to the member. You're actually speaking on the wrong...
wrong Clause 10?
The one that you need to talk about,
yes, Mr. Chair.
Which is in scope, yes, and I'd agree to be debated, yes, is actually review of sections 229A to 229CA. Yes. Review of sections.
Excellent, Mr. Chair. I wasn't aware, because when you announced the new clause 10, Mr. Chair, I wasn't sure of which of the excellent new Clause 10s that we were allowed to debate. This one does allow for a review of the changes that have been made, because, Mr. Chair, one of the things we've noted in the past when changes have been made to the membership of student associations is the use of referenda, is the use of review of provisions after a certain amount of time. This again was something that the National Party has previously said was an acceptable thing to have happen with student associations, and this particular Clause 10 would allow for reviews of the passing of particular clauses that have been previously in the Act. This allows students to continue to have a voice in how they are organised, because we have to remember, Mr. Chair, that fundamentally what the previous clauses that we have agreed to in this bill do is actually take away choice from students. The current clauses that are within this new part will actually have actually in the past given students the ability to have some control over their affairs. And essentially what is done by removing those clauses and bringing in the new clauses that have been done actually takes that choice away. So what we have to have is the capacity to review those clauses, to be able to say to students that they have an opportunity in front of them within 5 years to see whether they're working, to see what the impact of those has been on the provision of services, and also to make sure that students have a say. So the new Clause 10 that we are debating, as opposed to perhaps a future Clause 10 that we may debate shortly, requires a review of sections 229A to 229CA that have been included, that the Ministry of Education will run this review, and it will be 5 years after the date on which the Act receives royal assent. The review shall assess the impact of the provision on students and the tertiary sector in accordance with the terms of reference established in subsection 3, and subsection 3 says the terms of reference of the review shall be set out by the Minister of Education. The Ministry of Education will then report back to the Ministers of Education and of Tertiary Education. So this is a 5-year review clause of this change. And it's important, Mr. Chair, because the evidence that we have internationally is that student services disappeared when voluntary student membership arrived, in particular in Australia. 75% of the services provided by student associations disappeared under voluntary membership. And that had a huge impact on the experience that students had in their institutions. So the new Clause 10 that I am proposing would allow for a review to see what is the impact on students of doing this. There's been a lot of debate. We believe the evidence internationally shows us what the impact will be, but here's the opportunity for the national government to say, all right, we accept that we need to look and see what will happen when this legislation passes. We accept that there could be detrimental effects on students. The National Party might try and argue that in fact it'll be a positive thing for student services. Let's have a review and look at that. And that's what the new Clause 10 does. And 5 years is a good length of time, Mr Chair. I would suggest to be able to do that. I would have, Mr Chair.
Grant Robertson.
Mr Chair, now that I'm onto the right clause, there's a few more points to make. And that is that it may well be that some of the impacts of this won't appear immediately. Student associations may well be able to survive for a period of time based on their reserves and in an attempt to try and attract some members to the student associations. Difficult to do that at the start, perhaps, of a calendar year. So the impacts will emerge over a period of several years, and what this clause does is allow for a review after 5 years from when the Act receives its royal assent. Mr Chair, it is important that we do this because what is being done tonight effectively will change the nature of student experiences right across the tertiary sector. It's no small thing. It isn't, as some would say, just a technical change that allows students the freedom to do whatever they want. It fundamentally will undermine the experience of students in tertiary institutions. We've already heard tonight from Te Uroro Flavel the action that's been taken by Te Mana Akonga, and they are addressing in that a very specific matter, which is the role that the Māori student associations on campuses and at a national level play in the experience of Māori students. Not every student arriving at a tertiary institution is in the same place. Not every student arriving in a tertiary institution knows what's going to happen to them when they're there. And I know from my time in student associations and more recent times working in the tertiary education area, the strength of Māori student associations and indeed of some other student groups that help support groups within tertiary institutions is the key to the success of those students. By having a body of students that is able to support other students of the same ethnicity or of the same experience group, that has made a real difference in the lives of those students. And so the change that has been made tonight merits a review clause of this type, Mr Chair, because it is a significant change. It is a change to the that will affect the very well-being of students who attend tertiary institutions. And so I think the issues that Te Mana Akonga is raising within the acclaim are very, very legitimate ones about what kind of experience students have from different backgrounds when they come into a tertiary environment. And student associations over the years have worked very hard to be able to provide the support to those students. It's also the same with international students, and there's a different experience again then for international students coming into a foreign environment, not always understanding exactly not only how the institution works, but the customs and the interactions that go on between students that they're not familiar with. The Student Association has provided a vehicle for that, and it's a significant vehicle. It's also the other services that student associations have created over the years. Student job search, created essentially by students' associations on the initiative of students' associations. This is the very existence of something like student job search has made the difference in some students being able to stay and finish their studies. So the changes that are being proposed tonight in this bill fundamentally alter the experience of many students, and it deserves a review that will actually take into account what has happened if this bill passes. And as I say, Mr Chair, all the evidence we know from overseas is that that will be detrimental. But in New Zealand, we need to see it for what it really is and the impact that it will really have on students. The other part of the clause is exactly who's going to be doing this review. It should be the Ministry of Education. They are going to be impartial. They are not going to take into this any baggage around the past activities of students' associations. It's not politicising it. It's saying that the Ministry of Education will look at it. And there's an important point in that. It's the Ministry of Education because what student associations do is support the educational outcomes of students. This is a very important signal to be given, that actually what student associations do is about educational outcomes. There's been a lot of talk in this debate about unions and the fact that we don't have compulsory unionism outside of the tertiary sector. Why should we have it inside? It's because that's a fundamental misunderstanding of what student associations are. They are democratic bodies of students who make the choice to be students and at that point become part of a greater whole that is the student body. And by law we have since, as Mr Shearer said earlier, the late 1950s, early 1960s, made the decision that we will have organisations like this.
Chris Hipkins.
Thank you very much, Mr Chair. Mr Chair, if the National